So I think I'm starting to really understand this anarchist ideology. Oh yeah? How so? Well, it seems like you just want to abolish basically everything. Defund this, abolish that. Next you're going to tell me that you want to abolish Walmart. Well, actually, no, don't say it. Well, yeah, basically. We kinda do want to abolish Walmart. I mean, not every anarchist is going to outright say, abolish Walmart, though, #abolish Walmart, but we do believe in something called decentralization, which, if properly implemented, would inevitably have the effect of making Walmart obsolete. We'll get to the whole issue with Walmart in just a second, but first let's talk a little bit more about decentralization. It's a fairly simple concept. Essentially, it means that instead of having everything all grouped together, it's widely dispersed. This is in reference to power or governmental ability, but it can honestly refer to basically anything. For instance, decentralizing governance is when a society is restructured so many people or groups are responsible for the organization of society instead of just a few select oligarchs. We already talked a little bit about how decentralization works in government and hierarchical structures in a few of these videos, but it doesn't always have to be in reference to authority or power, and that's something that we haven't really covered yet. It could also be looked at economically, sociologically, politically, or even ecologically. In the workplace, for example, not only are many businesses centrally controlled, but they usually manufacture and produce goods in a single location. Think of something like shoes. Instead of having small shops making shoes in local areas for local consumers, we have large manufacturing plants that produce thousands of shoes in a centralized location and ship them all over the world. Or, say, instead of having something like local farms producing a variety of meat and vegetables for local consumers, we have massive factory farms that slaughter millions of animals annually in the most inhumane ways just to have a beef or pork or poultry industry. And even when we go to obtain these items, they're not sold in local markets to local people, they're housed in massive grocery stores or shopping malls or supercenters where thousands of people must drive for miles around to a central location to buy those goods. Okay, but what's the big deal? Those things allow us to have a modern society. What's wrong with all of it being centralized? Great question. Let's look at one teeny tiny, almost completely forgettable, but astonishingly deadly aspect of having centralized big box stores like Walmart. Simply driving there. And I'm not talking about the collisions involved in getting to that store, though I'm sure there are many, but instead the tiny little puff of CO2 that comes out the back of your average car while just driving there. When a grocery store is centralized, instead of just walking down the street, you physically get in your car and drive, sometimes for miles. Obviously, this adds CO2 or air pollution from your car, which on its own might not be that big of a deal, but according to the Institute of Transportation Engineers, it's estimated that one Walmart supercenter receives 10,000 car visits every single day. That's 10,000 cars per store every day. If you ever wonder why you always see people at Walmart at about 2 a.m., that's why. Now let's dig into this a little bit further. The median distance you have to travel to get to any Walmart in the United States is about 4.2 miles. If each vehicle emits roughly 411 grams of CO2 per mile, that's nearly 19 tons of CO2 every single day just commuting to one Walmart supercenter. But since there's 11,500 stores worldwide, most of them being supercenters, it's actually closer to 216,600 tons of CO2 every day. So to put that into perspective, that's almost the equivalent of 19 average oil refineries. But remember, Walmart is not the only big box store or supercenter in the United States. According to a JLL report in 2016, there's roughly 32.5 square feet per person of big box style retail space in America. That includes single-story retail space, big box stores like Walmart's, as well as shopping malls and strip malls. And that works out to being a little bit over 10 billion square feet, or almost 60,000 big box stores in America, if we average each store to be about 180,000 square feet, which is about the size of your average Walmart. So with my bad math, that's roughly 1 million tons of CO2 puffed into the air every single day just by driving your car to the store. That's more than 365 million tons per year. That's more than running 80 oil refineries or burning 16.4 billion car tires in the same amount of time. And I can't stress enough how this is just car exhaust from consumers driving one way to the store. I didn't even factor in the drive home, or production, shipping, manufacturing, warehousing, or anything else that's done with the goods inside the store, or even the CO2 produced by the energy consumed by the store themselves. More than 80 oil refineries worth of pollution, and to think we could have solved all of that by simply creating local community businesses that are within walking distance from your house. You know, like the way we had it before Walmart. And that, like I said, is just one teeny tiny little itty bitty aspect of the grand scale of consumption and production and waste that is accumulated through centralization. What about the factory that makes the shoes or cars or tea kettles? If all of the production is centralized, then all of the pollution from that production is going to be centralized. It's all going to be in one spot. All of the workers in that factory have to drive great distances to get to work, again creating the same problem as before. And the manufacturing process of massive quantities of semi-disposable goods pollutes the air, the groundwater, and produces tons and tons of physical trash that has to be, again, hauled away to another centralized location to be disposed of. And we haven't even begun to talk about manufactured and planned obsolescence, where all the goods that you buy wind up broken or obsolete within the first few months, regardless of if they could have been produced in a way that doesn't produce so much trash. And to go even further, something like a factory farm takes millions of animals and puts them in one tiny area, creating vast cesspools of biohazardous waste from fecal matter, leading to sickness and death of the animals, as well as incubating and spreading diseases and pandemics to human populations, not to mention contributing to toxic algae plumes that are poisoning oceans and choking out what's left of the Earth's fish reserves and completely decimating coral reefs. Just to name a tiny, tiny few. And let's not forget the centralization of power, where we allow one person or group of people to be in control of everything, which inevitably always leads to massive inequality, an inefficient or unbalanced distribution of goods, corruption, and exploitation. Centralization has proven over and over that it is inadequate of keeping the levers of power out of the hands of a greedy few. So for the vast majority of people, it is a failed system, and it is illogical to continue with a failing strategy. In the political sphere, it works very well to obtain power, but almost immediately it's consumed by corruption. If we could learn but one lesson from every single socialist experiment, and in fact, human experiment in general throughout history, it would be that centralization is flawed and we need a new system. And this isn't just an anarchist idea. The concept of grouping everyone and everything all in one central location has been proven to be a problem for hundreds of years. It was even explored by Engels in The Housing Question, stating, "The abolition of the antithesis between town and country is no more and no less utopian than the abolition of the antithesis between capitalist and wage workers. The present poisoning of the air, water, and land can be put to an end by the fusion of town and country." He was literally looking at how London was pouring manure into the sea and thought that there was probably a problem with that. He also stated, quote, "The housing question can be solved only when society has been sufficiently transformed for a start to be made towards abolishing the contrast between town and country, which has been brought to its extreme point by present-day society. Far from being able to abolish this antithesis, capitalist society, on the contrary, is compelled to intensify it day by day." Essentially, he's talking about decentralizing the people within cities so we could tackle problems like pollution, and today, global catastrophic climate change. And indeed, cities themselves are centralized to such a degree that they cause massive damage ecologically and to ourselves. Not to mention, they're a wonderful place to spread diseases. Okay, but even if all of this is true and it's as bad as you say, our entire society is set up this way. How on earth could we change it? How could we fix this? Well, at the moment, we can't really fix anything at all. The people that own and control the equipment and resources necessary to make that change are incentivized to keep things exactly as they are. They make profit off of the status quo, and decentralizing the industry, or God forbid, their power, would mean that they would lose that control. So this isn't something that we can rely on the elites to do for us. We have to make this change ourselves. And to do that, we need the resources and equipment currently owned by the ones who refuse to help. Writers like Murray Bookchin advanced on these ideas, stating that true decentralization of things like power structures as well as commodity production will allow us to not only get back to humanity, but could also save the planet ecologically by dismantling the capitalist-owned centralized production of agriculture and goods and spreading it across the community, making communities self-sustaining. What I'm basically saying is that if your food and clothing and shelter and other goods were all produced, acquired, manufactured, and done locally, it would dramatically impact climate change. And not only that, it would revitalize communities by bringing jobs back and by building new infrastructure to allow them to actually be self-sustaining. If your workplace, your home, and your retail store was all within walking distance, you would spend more time exercising outside with other people instead of being locked in a metal cage and stuck in traffic for hours. If goods were made locally and not mass-produced, they could be made to a higher quality and possibly even custom-built or tailored to the people within that community. You know, like the way things once were. And if people could make political decisions and vote directly on local policy, they would wind up in a far more free and democratic society. And this is no small task. We're going to need to physically build gardens and factories and local shops and make communities in the cities self-sustaining like they've never been before. But we have the technology to do that. And we have to make sure that we're also revitalizing and advancing the infrastructure in rural areas to become welcoming and incentivize people in the cities to migrate and decentralize themselves. And on top of all of that, we're going to need massive education and resources necessary to teach an entire population a completely new, more ecological way of living. Like I said, this is no small task. We have to mobilize a vast number of people to accomplish this. But it's not anywhere near impossible. And when faced with global catastrophic climate change and the possible end of humanity itself, we have to do something radical to make that change. The elites aren't offering you any real solution outside of a market solution. They want to continue to produce so you will continue to consume until that consumption completely destroys the entire world. We can't continue to go down this same path and hope that one day some genius is going to come up with a technical solution that'll just magically make everything better. We don't have the time to sit around and wait for that to actually happen. We have to do something now. Essentially, we have to abolish Walmart by decentralizing our commodity production. At least, that's the way I look at it. If you do get a chance, please check out all the links in the description box below. Hit that little bell button because you know that they are not going to tell you when I release a new video, and make sure you're subscribed because they're unsubscribing people every single day. And check out my merch store so you can wear anarchism aesthetically and not just believe in anarchist ideals and do anarchist practices. But just don't forget that wearing an anarchist t-shirt is no substitute for direct action. So thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.